Good morning and welcome back to Plannercraft. I'm Natalie and today we are going to be doing a bit of a deep dive into the CanvasWorkspace Link as well as the print to cut. So for those of you that don't know, the CanvasWorkspace Link is going to work with Adobe Illustrator and Adobe Illustrator only at this time. Meanwhile, the print to cut is going to work directly in your Canvas workspace. Now, they both have their pros and their cons, so I thought it'd be really good to do a video where we kind of break it down between the two so you can see what the difference is and which one might work for your setup better. Okay, we're also going to be looking at doing some other things with print to cut and how far we can push that. So let's dive on in. So firstly, I'm going to be talking about paper. So obviously when we are printing to cut, a lot of the time people will be talking about doing stickers. So like last week, if you watched last week's two videos, I used some printable vinyl. Okay, but print to cut doesn't have to stick to just vinyl. Okay, so we can go beyond that. So sitting just here, I have the cover from my gloss photo paper, which I've already preloaded into the printer. Now, this is A5, and you're going to see the first of the issues between the two shortly. And we'll talk about A5 in a bit more detail. But before we get that far, I just want to say that, while I'm using gloss photo paper for this bit, you don't have to be using gloss photo paper. If you've got matte photo paper, that's fine. If you've got pearlescent card, you can use that. If you've got some of the really nice Conqueror metallic papers that are designed specifically for inkjet, you can use those. Just be a little bit more mindful on what you're printing. So don't go trying to print full colour photo on it, it's not going to end up well. Or you can even look at some of the really top end photo papers that have like a spot of shimmer in, so you can really have some fun with your print to cut. Don't think it's either going to be white card or sticker paper. You can do so much more. Okay, so don't be afraid to say hi and let me know that you're watching. I will check with Lou that the stream's coming through okay. Cool. Okay, because I'm being told that there's nobody watching, and I know that's not true because Lou's watching in the other room. So, morning Linda, morning Mom. And if you need me to go back over anything I've just said, just give me a shout. So, I'm going to start off with our A5 gloss photo paper. And let's hop across to canvas. So, those of you who watched last week will have seen my print to cut setup in CanvasWorkspace. This will look the same wherever you are, as long as you have enabled your print to cut. So, we were saying last week about, that you enable your registration marks because that's what makes print to cut work. But when it comes to the paper size, we have to set it in artboard. And you can see that it has listed quite a few kind of standard sizes. But one thing you can't see is A5. So here's the first fall down. Now, if you happen to have the vinyl blade kit, you get the option of having a custom size mat, and it's meant for when you're tiling larger designs. Now, unfortunately, we can't use that setup with the registration marks. So if you want to be creating things on A5 sheets, which I know a lot of sticker companies tend to, or if you're doing something for a kit, for example, then that might not be the way to go for you, okay, unless you want to work in A4 and scale it down. Now, there are a few things to bear in mind with that, because you've got issues like the printable area and stuff. But if you go back to last week's video where I talk about that, it just becomes a bit more critical when you're then also scaling it down to A5. You can do it, but it's a bit of a nightmare to try and work out sizes and things. So the better way for this one is actually to use the ScanNCut Link. Okay, so I'm going to go, let's pop the Adobe up on screen so you can see it. Okay, and I'm going to go to New File, and hopefully it'll pop up on the same screen. Always a bit dodgy. Come on, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to go to Print, and hopefully there should be an A5 set up on there. So I want to view all. Okay, no A5. What do we do? So instead of relying on a preset, I'm going to go and put in A5 here, and we're going to set it up from scratch. So we have 148.5 is our width, and our height is 210. So it's literally half an A4. So if you're ever confused, you can always go back to that base structure of an A4 and just half it on the long edge. And that's how you go down an A size. If you want to go up one, you multiply the short edge by 2. Nice and easy way to remember. Okay, so we've got our kind of setup here. Now, you can set up your bleeds, but we're not going to need those because everything that we need to do is going to be contained within that sheet, because we need those registration marks to work. Now, before I go and create, one thing that I will say is, if you are working with an inkjet printer like I will be, then you're going to be kind of a little bit cut off at the bottom typically. The edges you can kind of get away with because there's a border around your registration marks, but the bottom border is going to be the issue. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to set my height to 200, and that's going to compensate hopefully for that bottom edge. So we should get away with that. I'm going to go to Create, and hopefully that's going to open a new document. I might think about it a bit because we've got an awful lot of windows open at the moment, just so you can see everything. On the other hand, you might just ignore me entirely. Ah, there we go. So we've got our A5-ish. So it is ish. Now, as long as you set up your ScanNCut Link correctly, you're going to go to File, down to the Brother ScanNCut Link, and we're going to add registration marks. Now, the reason I say that you should do this as your first step is straight away you can check whether that is going to print correctly. So if we do Command and P or Control and P on a PC, we can then, if I bring that in, we can then see whether it's going to print. Now, at the moment, it's saying media size is defined by the driver. That's all very well, but I need that to be A5. So I'm going to find A5. And we can see it's awfully close on that bottom edge, but there's a little bit of room up the top for leeway. So, placement down here, we can actually kind of move it around so we get it where we want it. So just there is looking fine. Make sure that it says do not scale, and so long as you're happy with that, we can just go done, and then we can go and print that later. Job done. So in your layers, you have this layer here, which is your registration marks, and you'll notice that it's locked. That's because once they're in, we want to leave well enough alone. Okay. Now, as a rule of thumb, I will actually create another layer. So I end up with 2. And I'm going to rename them. So if you double click, I'm going to have one called print and one called cut. That way we're separating out our image data from our cutting data, which means that when we then send that to our machine, we know what exactly we're getting. Now, as I said, this is a deep dive, so we're going to go a little bit more advanced. Now for the next point when you're working with ScanNCut Link compared to print to cut. Although I'm setting this up and I'm saying draw, and it could be that that is foil or emboss or whatever, all the lines that you create in Illustrator that you send through to your ScanNCut are going to be cutting and drawing lines. So that's just something to bear in mind. There is no way of distinguishing between the two. Okay, whereas if you want to really get to grips with doing the drawing and the foiling and everything else, you're probably better off hopping back across to Canvas. Okay, but the benefit of Illustrator is that we can actually start to get really way more advanced. So if you have a printer that has a duplexing unit, for instance, so that's where it can print double-sided, then you can actually double-side your print to cut. So you only need your registration marks on one side, just to save a little bit of ink. It doesn't save very much, but it saves a little bit. And then you can actually have double-sided pieces, which can be useful if you are starting to do things like model making, for instance. So that is the benefit of them working with that Illustrator ScanNCut Link. So as I said, this is a real deep dive, so this is going to be pushing what they can do to their limits. And don't be afraid to do that. Creativity comes in the limitations. So another thing to say is you can see that at the moment these registration marks look really big, and that's because we're used to seeing them at A4 scale. So don't be daunted by them. It's just that it looks bigger than it is because you actually zoomed in that little bit more to that A5. Okay, so we've created our layers, and I'm going to go down to my print first, because you always want to kind of create your print layer first and foremost before you even worry about the cut. Now I'm not going to go into great depth about doing lots of stickers, so I'm going to actually go for something, and let's go a bit bigger. So I'm going to go to File and Place. Have a think about it. And I'm going to go to my Dropbox. Ding, ding, ding. It's going to be a bit slower than usual because I filled it. Okay, so let's go down to Files by Others. And I'm just going to use something that I've downloaded from Creative Recreate Design Bundles, etc. And that's a good way to kind of start practicing these advanced techniques. So you're not having to worry about creating that initial image. And I want something that I can print to cut with. Let's go for, that sounds cute, Bear clip art. And if it's a PNG, even better. Now I'm going to switch the view to columns just so I can see a preview. So, oh, it's cute. But I want something that's going to work big and have something to work with. Okay, let's go for something like this. And I'm going to place that Now when we go to place, it's going to kind of hold it in like a holding pattern. Okay, so you can actually load up this with a lot of different images, and then away you go. So if you're doing stickers, it's a quick way of doing those. Morning, Deb. But we can actually then click and drag, and we can fill that space with that image. If you want it at original scale, you can just click and away you go. But for this one, yeah, that's looking kind of cute. Okay, so that's all well and good. We've got our PNG in, and it's got a transparent background. Not that we can see that at the moment, but should you want to double check, we're just going to get a rectangle. We'll fill it with some colour. Doesn't really matter what at this point. So let's fill it with, let's go kind of TV aqua colour, because it's just to prove a point. Okay, and you want to drop that down beneath your image. There you go. So there's our transparent background. So if you wanted to put background into that, you can do. You can play with your images in lots of different ways. That actually looks quite cute with that little panel just there. Okay, job done. And you'll note I haven't put any of that into our cut layer. Okay, so might be that we put some text in there too. So let's do, this would be quite funky because it's a bee's home. So let's go, welcome to your new home. And we're going to select our font, and I don't want to be too fussy with this today, but it's just nice to see something a bit different, isn't it? I tend to get stuck with the same old. Let's go for this one, and let's pop a return in there. And pop that there, center it. There we go. And let's have that in white rather than black. It's going to look that much brighter if we do. Okay. And a little bit bigger. So far so good. So we've got our image in. But how are we actually going to cut that out or do anything else to it? Because a lot of that is now images or text. It's not an actual path. So first things first, we're going to select our rectangle. Now when you're selecting shapes in Illustrator as opposed to an Affinity, for instance, you actually need to just tick the box on the right hand side, and that's going to select it. I need to duplicate it, which is, I keep trying to do key presses that aren't going to work. It's not good. So I'm going to copy that, and then you want to go paste in place. So that means it's going to put it back in the same place, but it's going to pop it at the top. We're going to take that rectangle and we're going to drop it inside our cut layer. So there's our first cut shape. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is take the colour out of it. I'm also going to pop a colour in the stroke. Doesn't matter what colour, just pop one in there for now. That's so we can see the shape. So if we were to send this to cut at the moment, it's going to cut that panel out and ignore everything outside of it. Now that might be what you want. But on the other hand, if you want to do something shaped, let's push the software again. So I'm going to go down and select just that image. Okay, the text isn't overlapping, so we don't need to worry about it. But this image here, if we want to have a cut line that goes around there, how are we going to do it? Okay, so we can go into our image tracing, and you can see that you've got lots of different options here. Now, let's try cut path trace. Some art will respond better to cut path trace, some will be better as silhouette, so we'll see how it goes. Not bad, not bad. However, it has got rid of the original, so we want to make sure that we keep both. Okay, so if we go back to our source image, we can kind of see that that trace is going to be pretty perfect. Good job. So rather than reword it, let's just do a quick edit and then copy it, and we're going to paste it back into that cut layer, and we can do our image tracing. So let's go back a step, back another, just so that we get back to our source image. So always pay attention to what it's telling you in your layers palette, because it's always going to say exactly what you're doing, what it's seeing it as. So with that image selected, we're going to go copy, and let's go paste in place. So because I selected that rectangle first, it's popped it into our cut folder, and that then means that we're doing our image tracing on our correct copy branch. So cut path trace, okay, so we have our image tracing. Now you're going to notice that it has a white background. Don't worry about that at this stage, we're going to expand that and let's see how that's working for us. If we drop it down, you're going to see lots and lots of shapes. With some you'll see like you've only got 2 or 3. If it's really complex design where you've got lots of separate elements, you're going to see lots of those. But the only one that we're really interested in is that white background panel. You want to select it and then you want to delete it. Okay, so that we're getting that away because we don't need it. We just want to have focus on that shape there. Now at the moment this is all groups, so usually if you're working in Affinity we'd weld it and go, there you go, one shape, away it goes. Illustrator on the other hand, it does prefer to try and keep those elements as separate. Now the issue comes when we want to weld that group to that base rectangle. Okay, so we'll probably ungroup it at that point. But for now, as we want to edit it as a whole, keep that group active and we're going to select just that group. Okay, so if we look at this, we can see that it's saying I've got a question mark here, and that's a clue that something isn't necessarily the colour or the type of stroke that you think it is. So you just want to kind of click through and just check that everything is as it should be. So if we go here, we can see that rather than doing that as a solid shape, it's just done it as a stroke, because we can see this path going down the centre of our shape. So if we have something like that where it is a stroke rather than a shape, we need to make sure that actually before we do anything else, we take that path and we outline the stroke. It just means that when we do our weld, then it's going to weld properly. And same here, we've got a stroke there. So object, path, and outline stroke. Unfortunately, there isn't a key press unless you set one up for this. So let's zoom out. See all these around here will also need the same. So let's make our lives a little easier. Let's see if we can find these other shapes as well. So sometimes it'll let you, but because we're working that group, here's another top tip, right? if you're working in a group and you're struggling to select things, double tap it. Okay, you're going to see that your screen changes up here. So it says cut, then group. And you're going to notice that your layers palette changes. So away goes all the other data that you've put on your page. Don't worry about it, it's sat there, but it's kind of hidden away so that you can't accidentally click on it. You're then working just solely within that group. Isolation mode is great. And then we can actually go, okay, let's highlight that line and let's see if we can find another one. So that's a shape, so we don't need that one. Just that one. We've done the compound path. As you work your way around, you'll probably be able to work out which bits are strokes anyway. So let's outline that one. So see, that one is already a shape because that path goes around the outside. There we go. So if ever you need to zoom somewhere, if you select the item first and then just zoom either in or out, it's going to jump to it, which is a really handy little shortcut. Again, Affinity doesn't always manage that one. So if you're working with something that's really complex, it's one of the times when Illustrator really shines. Because it's just handy just to go around and just check everything. There we go. So everything should now be a proper shape and such. Okay, so now I can reselect that group. So it's just going to have everything in there selected. And then we can use our Pathfinder and we can weld that all into one. Fingers crossed. Now sometimes when you do that, you're going to find that it doesn't do it quite how you want it to. So let's ungroup it and try again. It's got 2 chances. Okay, doesn't like something. Something's not right. So let's take these 2. Mind you, the butterfly is floating free. So the ones that you really want to concentrate on are the ones that overlap. So it's not that one. I know it's this one. Has it actually done it already? It's just not admitting it. There we go. What we want to see, yeah, that's perfect. See, look, it knows what it's doing, even if I'm like, no. So, with all these elements, now what we need to do is actually convert it ready to a cut path. So we want no fill, black stroke. So let's do that for other elements as well. Now, in this case, those dashes are just on the edge. So that one we might need, that one we don't. So we can just delete that out of the way. Seems a bit extreme, but that's still within. If it's on an edge, if you're not certain, leave it there. But that one can go. And the reason is we just want to have this kind of shape here just to shape that edge. Now, if like the actual bee's nest was a separate shape, you take that away too, because what you want is any shape that overlaps this cut edge here, and make sure that stays put. Okay, so we're going to take those and we're going to make sure that those have an empty fill and stick a colour in the stroke. Done. Okay. Now, once you have something that looks like that, we're going to double click anywhere which isn't part of that group. So off to the side, and we can see that we've got our black lines now. So now we can select everything that's on that cut path, and we do that by just clicking the little box on that layer, and we can weld everything together. And that should go down to one path. So that's going to cut around that outside. Now at the moment that's going to cut directly on that outside line. If you want to add a bit of an offset to it, you can do that too. So with that path still selected, we can go to path and offset path. And there you go, we can add a border. Okay, and might not make it that big. Let's just go to, there we go. Now, if you end up wanting to smooth out things like this little bump here, just because it doesn't look quite right, you can do that. So I'm going to go OK. Now we have two cutting paths, and it might be that the one that is currently selected is the new one, and then the smaller one is like the one that was deselected. So we could go around and actually go, well, we could actually foil the edge if you wanted to, so that we have like an inner border. Now it's probably not going to work for the design on screen, but it might work for something that you're working on. So just so you know how that we can do that, you're just going to click on that layer, you're going to drag it upwards, and you can put it in the drawer one. Now bear in mind what I said about the Illustrator only be able to like cut and draw. So you would end up sending these two layers at separate times, just so that you don't end up with things doing things that they shouldn't do. Now I'm going to go back to my cut line, and because it's a path, we can still sort out this bit here. So for instance, if you're foiling this edge here, okay, that would still work because you've got that dash there. But because we've offset outwards, it's going to look like this is a bit of a mistake. So I'm going to go to my node tool. So you can either click on it in the toolbar or press A. And then we can actually just take out the offending node. So to do that, we're just going to click and drag. Now, if you accidentally find that your image is reacting, that's what it looks for. So we can lock a layer. It has to behave then. Okay, so click and drag over the top. Now, if we just delete, you're going to lose a line and you're going to panic. Don't worry. You can either join that back up with a pen tool, or if we go undo, and I'm going to zoom in, zoom. So with this one highlighted here, we've got lots of options with the pen tool, one of which is if we then hover over a point that's already there, we can click on it to remove it. You're going to notice that your little pen icon is going to change, so it has a minus next to it. So you can take out that point, and you want to take out all the points of that little kink, and there's one there too. So I'm going to take that out, and then we should have a nice smooth line for our cut line, which makes us ScanNCut much happier. There we go. So that's something to bear in mind, especially if you have an older model, is that if a file is cutting particularly noisily, chances are it's because you've got lots of individual nodes and it's having to adjust for each of those nodes. So if it's going, chances are you haven't got your line work quite clean enough. So you just need to give that a bit of a clean. So that's great and all, and we can do some basic things with in terms of like how we're foiling and stuff, but let's see if we can push that a little bit more. So we've got our text here, and I'm going to select my text now. At the moment I can't because it's locked, but I want to copy it, so I need to select it. Okay, I'm going to copy, and before I do anything else, I'm going to lock that print layer back. Okay, now I'm going to say about foiling it, so I can click in my draw layer, edit, and paste in place. That's going to give me that extra copy. Now we're going to want to send this to our ScanNCut, so it doesn't need that welcome to your new home as text, it needs it as paths. So if we go to type, create outlines, it's going to convert that to a path. Okay, now we have our white fill in there at the moment, but if we want to make this so that we can foil it, for instance, or we might be colouring it in with a particular pen, so for example we might be using the glue pen and foiling it that way rather than using the fork wheel, you're going to want to pop a colour in there. Now what I would say is either go with a colour that is the colour that you're going to foil with, so a rough kind of gold shade if you're using gold for instance, or go for something that is so completely different to your actual image. So for instance in this case I'd probably go for the like neon pink, that it's obvious that that's not going to be printed. Okay, so if you're finding that you're struggling with getting your foil to transfer, go with the first route of having it a similar colour. If on the other hand you want to have it so that you can just save your ink, like I have where I've done it in white on the bottom layer, then you can go for that contrast. Okay, so what else might we do? We might add in detail to our image. Now image tracing is, you know, all well and good, but sometimes it's not going to give you the look that you're going for. So I did say this was a deep dive. We can actually start to draw in our own details, so we can actually go and pop that line there. Okay, and when you finish that line, just hit enter or double click. Okay, and at first glance you're going to think, okay, that looks a little bit weird, and it's because the fill's still in there, so take that fill out and give it a black stroke. Stroke doesn't have to be huge, but it doesn't really matter because it doesn't really transfer in that way, it's just giving you that path. Okay, and it might be that then you go, well actually I want to go and add in a little bit more detail. There we go, hit enter, and we're ready to draw our next line by hitting that enter key. Just always try to put a curve in if it's something organic, and it will look far better than if you just go click and put a straight line in. Try and follow the form of the leaf, so I'm going to follow that curve so that it's going to go up and around there. And you don't have to do a lot, you could just do a couple. What I would say is if you do it up here, just make sure you do some of the leaves here. Okay, so just for a little bit of speed, because we're already at 40 minutes. Jeez, where'd time go? And I wanted to talk a little bit about how we can work this in Canvas too. So what you would then do is we're going to shrink up our layers, okay, and I'm actually going to lock all of our layers too, and the reason that I do that is I don't want anything accidentally moving once I've got to this point. So all your layers should be locked, and locking isn't going to prevent you from hiding layers, so that's something else. So I'm going to hide my path layers, and I'm going to keep my registration marks and my print layer visible, and that is how we send stuff to print. So at the moment that's quite a big commitment to make on a print. So let's just zoom that back out and actually unlock that temporarily just to put this in a slightly better position. Now, the other thing that I need to say that I haven't said already is if I take these layers and kind of treat them as one, so they're all selected like so, and move them around. As long as they're all selected, it doesn't matter. But if I drag it up to this corner, you're going to notice that you get a chunk missing out. That's just something to bear in mind. That is the area that you need to leave clear for your registration marks to work. So if you, while I said that you could work with most papers, if you are working on something like a grey metallic, lilac metallic, cream metallic, just bear in mind that you do kind of need to have a bit of contrast in those corners, and you could do that a number of ways if you wanted to. You know, you could do it with stickers and things just to make it so that your registration marks are clear. And I'm going to take that and let's just resize that. If we press and hold shift, we're going to get that in proportion. And that'll be just there. And make a nice panel for the front of the card. Now, just before I finish on that one, I'm just going to pop back to my print layer, just because I've had another idea. And I'm going to go and place, so it should go back to the same folder, and I want a little bee that we can 3D up. So that's kind of cute. Let's go for place. It's going to give us that little pop up again, and I don't want it too big considering our other bees are so small, so probably about there. And it's going to look like it's tiny. Oh, really, it is a bit, but maybe a little bit bigger, just so he looks like he's flying towards. Perspective is everything, so we can resize that as need be. Make sure you don't go too close to your edges because that printable area. And then once you're happy, of course, we can do our copy, lock into our cut because we just want to cut it out. Paste in place to make sure we're pasting our image, and we can use that same image trace. See, this is what I mean. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So let's try that again. See how it goes. It's not too bad, apart from the fact that, you know, wanting to cut out the eyes. But that's okay, we can expand that. And if we go and drop down our groups, so this is where I'm saying that you have multiple shapes here that we can actually go. Let's take out the background first of all, because we don't need it. We don't need the white shape there for the eye, don't need the white shape for the other eye. We do, however, need that white shape in there. So this is a good opportunity to show you something else. Now, shapes that appear over other shapes that are the same colour can be deleted, not needed. So we have our white shape here and the black shape there. Now, if we hide that and that white shape stays, then brilliant. But if we hide it and it disappears and we've got black bob, what I actually need to do is select those two shapes, use our pathfinder and just subtract. And then we've got our little hole for our cut bath. Job done, nice and easy. Remove the fill, black stroke, job done. And if you want to do an offset again, you can apply that same offset. So object, path, offset path. Now this time, because it's quite a small object, if we do a 2mm offset, it can look a bit daft, even though that matches our main panel. So I'm just going to reduce that down to 1. And that's something to bear in mind whether you're working on the Scan and Cut, if you're working on the canvas. When you're doing your offset, just try and scale it to what you're doing, because otherwise it can look a bit daft. Okay, and because we've put that offset on, we don't have to have that compound path anymore, so we can delete that. And there we go. And again, if you want to take out these little bumps on your cut path here, you can do. So we now have the start of our card design, and this is something you can work on and build up with digital kits. You know, if you've purchased the digital versions of our papers, you can use those in the same way as well. So, and it can go so much further. So I'm just aware of the time at the moment, but if you'd like to do a workshop on this, let me know and I will set that up, because there's so much more that we can do. Okay, so I'm going to leave that one there for now, and I will come back to it in a bit and finish that off and pop that up onto Facebook. But just before I do, just so that you kind of see how you're going to send this, so you would basically block these, hide these, print the sheet as is, okay? And just for time, you would then, let's do our drawing first on this one, I think, because we've got all this foiling here. And what you can do is just go to ScanNCut Link, and then you've got the same two options as you would expect to see in Canvas. So you can export it to an FCM file, or you can transfer it via the Wi-Fi. Now, it also works the same way as print to cut in terms of the kind of other end of the process. So do go back and have a look at Friday's video where I show you how the registration marks work, and then you can go from there. So we would send that one first, set up our drawer with the foiling, foil it, and away you go. Then once you've done your foiling, you're going to hide that and you're going to put the cut layer on, and you're going to do the same. So you're going to go to File, ScanNCut Link, and transfer that via Wi-Fi or by the file, and that's when you would select your cut. So you do have that kind of staggered double send in Illustrator. Now I'm going to do this super duper quick in Canvas. So if there's any questions, pop them in the comments and I'll try and answer at the end. So let's say that we go for A4 because that is the closest we can get to A5. Okay, now bear in mind that CanvasWorkspace with the PDF route doesn't mind how you scale it to a certain extent. Now bear in mind this is going to be pushing it down to more or less half the original size. So if you look at your registration marks in Illustrator, like I said, they're going to look bigger. So you are going to want to be using your printer at its highest resolution to get those targets spot on. And it may be that some lower end printers might not be able to achieve this straight out the gate without a little bit of work. So, okay, we're going to go to our files and we're going to import from your computer. Actually, no, we're not. I'm going to change my mind. Let's do illustrating because it's easy to just skip the one and we'll go straight into that. Now, being on a Mac, we can jump straight back to that folder that I was just using in Illustrator without having to navigate to it. On PC, you'll probably find that you'll have to actually re-navigate back rather than having a shortcut, but that's fine. It's going to have a think. Come on. Okay. Now, let's find that same image. There we go. There's our little. I'm going to think about it. Okay, so we can see that it's traced around the outside, straight at the gate, and it's looking all good and perfect. So, as long as you have that, and chances are if you've used a PNG, you will do, we're going to go okay. But make sure that this box here is ticked. That's really important because we still need that image data in the file. Okay, it's going to come in, it's huge. Don't worry. We're going to go to layers and you can see that it's already got that as a group, including that image, so that the two are locked together. So then we can resize that down, 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 down. It's about that big in Illustrator, so let's go for about that. Okay. And in here you can see at the moment all that is set to cut. So if I go to the group and then come on brain, my brain's not working today because it's got that image in. It's going to be a bit more. There we go. So select your paths. I want to set those to draw, so that's going to be our foiling line. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to put in that back panel. So into our basic shapes, I'm going to go for a tall thin rectangle, or at least it will be tall by the time we've rotated it, stretched it a bit. Okay, and that goes about there. So then we had it so it's a little bit narrower because of that trails here. Like so. And let's give it a colour. So, fill colour. Let's bring the palette over here so you can actually see it. And there you go. Kind of right. Let's make it a little bit more. Let's have a look at this one. Put back on. It's like a tealy blue. So that's about it. There we go. So I need to drop that down. Now if I grab that there and drop that down here, it's going to put it inside the group. Okay, so then we're kind of locking the two together. Now bear in mind what I said about the foiling bit here. You're still going to want to do that welding step that we do. So set that to draw. And although we need that colour underneath, we're going to need another copy. Now if we do a duplicate in Canvas, let's just do that. So down the bottom of the layers palette, can't quite see it on your screen, but if I do a duplicate, it's going to drop it down and to the right. So I'm then going to select our original shape. So we've got them both selected on the layers panel. We go to edit and then we can align to the left and align to the top. So then they're in the right place. Okay, now this top shape, we are going to want to go and take that colour out. So that's it, gone. And then we can see that all these elements here, we can then weld those together. So weld, and then we should have a cut line that goes around the outside. There we go. So we've then gone, okay, that's all welded there. That's welded there. Fair enough. But let's say we want to do that offset again. At the moment, these are all individual shapes. So what you want to do is kind of have it so that we take these out of this group, which can feel a bit scary. So they can be up there in a group of their own. So I'm going to group those two. Okay, so we've got our print and our draw. Okay, now I need a copy of that draw group to also give me my cut line. So again, if I zoom out, you're going to notice it's offset it. So select the two, edit, align left, align top, so that the two align correctly. Okay, so I'm just going to click anywhere else just to get out those groups. And then our top layer we can call cut, and we can then set those two cut lines, and we can do the offset as we need to. So offset, and we did 2 mil outwards, and this time because I'm working in that cut layer I can delete the original. Okay, and then we've got that there. We can then do that for each of those shapes in that cut layer. So offset, okay, and you've got our next shape. Now we've just got that last one to do. So when we get to our last shape in our group, because we've just offset this one here, it's going to take it out of the group because you can't have a group of one shape. So what we want to do is just remember that we need to offset that last shape too. Now the good news is that's generally the biggest shape, so it's going to be really obvious that you've forgotten it. Okay, and at this point we're going to select all of those shapes that we've just offset, and then we can go to edit, and then we're going to weld those together like so. So with this one you can see that our dashes went a bit more outside the actual panel, so you're going to want to keep that kind of profile there as opposed to when we did it with the other one. That's just something to bear in mind. Okay, and back in here we can always label our shape layer as cut, just because there's no other shapes for it to be grouped, so you can't name a group because there's only one shape. And you could repeat the same for the B. And then that draw layer, it can be that you're going to draw it with a nice pen. It could be that you're going to be using it for foiling. It could be that you're using a paint pen or some type of outliner. Now bear in mind that if you are using something that's slow drying, still use that foiling function so that it can draw from the bottom up rather than the draw function. So I hope you've enjoyed that deep dive and kind of started to get your head around roughly how we can work with different print sizes between the two. So just very quickly, what you would do in terms of your Canvas workspace is go to export PDF file, and because we've got that shape there at the bottom, we can't use the images only, so basically just hide other elements, and you can then just go all visible layers, and away you go. Print it to fit, and that should work. Any questions before I go that you may have had along the way? It's been very quiet today. Is there anything you'd like to see in terms of me either printing these, the cutting process, the foiling process, drawing process? Don't be afraid to ask. No such thing as a silly question. Any questions in there, Lou? Any questions? I don't mean it from you. I think she's gone to sleep in there. So, that file was from Creative Fabrica. That's okay. Did you try ringing, did you? Yeah, that didn't work, did it? Hey ho. Right, if there's no questions, I'm going to go. Thank you for joining me. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. Take care, and I will see you later this week when I will be doing some digital scrapbooking. So if you've ever wondered how to work with digital papers, Friday is going to be the one to watch. Take care for now, and bye.